We don't know exactly what effect it will have. So that remains an open question.
Thank you.
Open question, or just probably more of an open goal?
Cathryn, do you have a view on this?
Well, hello then, I do hope you're all well. And will this wicked, evil Braverman Bill really stop the boats? In other words, will it be a deterrent to make vulnerable people think twice about risking their lives in one of the busiest shipping lanes while sat in a dinghy? Now, that was a question asked by Tory MP for Sleaford and North Hykeham, Dr. Caroline Johnson, to Senior Research Fellow at Policy Exchange, Sir Stephen Laws, and then gave the same question to Professor Cathryn Costello. And what they had to say was very enlightening.
I wanted to ask about the deterrent effect. The government was quite keen to deter the number of people coming across the small boats. No one wants to see people dying in the channel. Do you think the bill as drafted will deter people coming across the channel? And if so, what about, if so, why? And if not, why not?
Thank you for that question. So we've actually just been doing some work on this deterrence question. There's quite a bit of research in this area, and I'd be happy to send over a summary. But in short, the available evidence suggests that the deterrent effect of asylum policies tends not to be very large. And there are three main findings from this research. I mean, there's one caveat, by the way, which is that it's based on countries that have actually restricted asylum in much more moderate ways than what the illegal migration bill proposes. So that's one important caveat. But I think the three main findings from this research is that, first of all, the reasons that people leave their countries of origin are typically beyond the control of destination countries like the UK, and they don't typically have much to do with immigration policy. Instead, war, conflict, inequality, they're the big drivers of asylum migration, at least statistically. The second finding is that prospective asylum seekers don't always have a good or accurate, detailed knowledge of what policies will face them when they arrive. And the information they often have is inaccurate or misleading. And for a deterrent policy to work, those that it's targeting would need to have knowledge, and the research, qualitative research, mainly with asylum seekers to the UK and other countries, suggests that the knowledge of asylum policy isn't that detailed. And then thirdly, when it comes to the decision of what country to go to, that depends on other factors in addition to policy, and actually policy doesn't seem to figure very strongly in this calculus, but things like the presence of family members, a perception of the UK as self-welcoming, tolerant, democratic country, and the English language, those are things that tend to be more powerful drivers. But I will say, because the provisions of the bill are more radical than what we've seen in other comparable states in Europe, we don't know exactly what effect it will have. So that remains an open question.
Thank you.
Open question, or just probably more of an open goal?
Cathryn, do you have a view on this?
I think you've just heard an accurate summary of the evidence base. The scholarship that exists in quantitative political science, which has tended to look at this, particularly when it looks at detention as a deterrent, or as asking the question whether detention serves as a deterrent, has tended to find not, and that's based on very rigorous empirical studies around the world. I think the qualitative work that's been done in the UK, including by the Home Office, tends to, just confirm that picture that asylum flows always vary. They tend to vary, particularly because of country of origin conditions. But when it comes to country of reception conditions, the economy does matter. So, if your economy really tanks, your asylum numbers might fall. But policy itself, asylum policy in particular, doesn't seem to, in general, have a huge impact on numbers of people claiming asylum for the reasons that you just heard.
So what would deter people from crossing the channel?
I think that's a very good question. I think what we know is that at a certain point in these journeys, which are often long and protracted, people are extremely dangerous. So if you think about the most dangerous maritime crossing in the world, which is the central Mediterranean route, often individuals, by the time they get to Libya, are in extremely dire straits. And they often then, feel like that incredibly dangerous journey is still worth it. They're often indebted because they've had to make a very protracted, dangerous journey. So I think that there are certainly interventions one could do in France to assist asylum seekers, to improve things on the French side if the UK were really willing to put resources in there. But there are serious structural problems with the French asylum system. I think the other thing to be borne in mind is that, there was a period not that long ago where family members who were in northern France, or individuals who had close family members in the UK, were enabled to travel to the UK after the ZAT case, which I can share some information on. So there definitely would be ways of deflecting people into a safe route, offering them safer access to the UK. That would clearly deter people from turning to smugglers. I think encouraging people to avail of the protections that are available in France, but that's been tried, I think, on a number of occasions. But I think, these are complex problems, and you would have to really take seriously the complex drivers that exist and the high level of desperation that exists when people are at these points in a journey where they're often extremely indebted. And they, think, okay, this last leg of the journey is extremely dangerous. I do want to say this isn't a new problem in the sense that, maybe you didn't have hearings on the issue and we didn't have radical bills like this coming to force, but there's quite some evidence that, the previous dangerous route to the UK, which tended to be stowing away in lorries, which is also life-threatening and dangerous. It may even be more dangerous than getting on a small boat to cross the channel. We had to really think carefully about how to deter that. And, partly, I think what started to happen with small boat crossings is that it's much more difficult now to stow away or to travel by that means to the UK because detection has gotten better. It's a complex empirical problem. But asylum policy, deterrent asylum policy in general does not work.
I take that as a no then. But I have to say, I found Sir Stephen Law's take on the documentation or knowledge situation very interesting, especially when I thought to myself, if I don't know what knowledge I will need to claim asylum, how the hell are they going to know? And I can imagine that makes it even more time consuming. And when he talked about people or having family already live here, that's already a massive pull, isn't it? And if you speak the language as well, all the better. But also what Professor Cathryn Costello talked about, these desperate people taking the trek to Libya and being in dire straits, and clearly what it sounds like to me, as far as what I could see she was saying, was it doesn't matter what you put in front of these desperate people. Desperate people will just do desperate things. And in this bill, it just seems like a complete waste of time and money, and it won't stop the boats. But we'll just get the gammons frothing at the mouths and get them all, get the base going. And also, Dr. Caroline Johnson, when she was hearing all this, I bet she was thinking, maybe I shouldn't have voted for this a month ago. But never mind. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.